the most astonishing movements. And I just want to point out this. They have a term for people. They don't call them persons with mental illness. They call them users of mental services and family experts, as that is. The idea is not that you're a patient, you have to simply be taken care of. The fact is that they begin with the idea that the families and the patients themselves are the experts in this area. So we face in this region, if one goes back and realizes and looks at what kind of resources are available, whether it's in Malaysia, in Indonesia, which has less, or in a place like Aceh that has 4 million people and 4 psychiatrists, there is still a remarkable lack of investment in the area of mental health. The World Health Organization says, the research shows that 12 to 14% of the global burden of disease comes from a variety of mental illnesses, and only 2%, in Malaysia, about 1.5% of the national health budget is in the mental health area. And this is a kind of important gap. Now, part of the reason for this continues to be a pessimism, an idea that if you have a mental illness, you don't get better. I often give lectures to groups of psychiatrists, and I say to them, look, I'm going to show you some data that shows that if you follow people with the most severe mental illnesses over not 5 years, but over 20 years, more than half of them recover. And I know most of you don't believe this. And why is this the case? Well, largely it's the case because, I say to psychiatrists, because you see the patients that don't get better. The patients that get better go home, they live in the community. Those that remain ill continue to see you. And so people have the idea that if you ever have had schizophrenia, you will never recover. The data shows that it's not true. But there remains among the medical profession a deep commitment to the idea that if you ever begin taking a psychiatric medication, you're going to have to take it for the rest of your life. So I say to people, to the psychiatrist, and I was at a big meeting in Taiwan not long ago, and I said, now I just want you to play, I know you don't believe that people recover, but I want you to actually engage in a thought experiment. If you believe that people recover, if you believe that even the most serious persons with the most serious mental illness recover, what kind of a mental health care system would you build? If you believe that long-term hospitalization actually produces chronicity, if you believe that, then what kind of a healthcare system would you build? Well, there'd be several characteristics. First of all, you would want to really understand different illnesses and treat each kind of illness properly. You'd also want to begin early. You would want to begin with early intervention programs for people who are young. Schizophrenia mostly occurs first in people who are ages 15 to 25. You would want to keep people out of the hospital if you could. You would want to support people living in families. In Malaysia, in Indonesia, in much of the world, in Asia, 90% of persons with mental illness live with their families. But it's a huge, difficult problem for families. And one of the things, if you wanted to build a mental health system that was aimed at recovery, would be to support families. And you would also want to provide good quality, acute care for people that was in their communities, close to where they live. You would want to engage them. You would not want to simply make them become welfare dependent. You would actually want to begin involving them in community life, help them regain their life, help them get back to work, and develop a higher ratio of short to long-term inpatient treatment. Now, I think there's some great news stories going on in the mental health area. We can talk about it later. China is actually beginning to scale up services in a larger way into the rural areas than has ever happened in history. There are new forms of community mental health services and actually a beginning of a movement toward people really overcoming stigma and becoming less pessimistic, becoming actually committed to the notion of helping people recover rather than simply live with chronic illnesses. This is what the Shanghai Mental Health Center was imagined to become. This is what it looks like today compared with that photo from 10 years ago. This is a reminder that the Modernist project is also coming now into mental health in a society like China, but it's also true elsewhere. Just a final couple of words about one example. Mary Jo and I worked in post-tsunami, post-conflict Aceh. A lot of you know about this. A lot of you saw it very close by. This is what it looked like after the tsunami. But many of you know that there was also a conflict, a serious conflict that was going on, and we were invited by the International Organization for Migration first to do a major survey of the mental health problems that came out of that trauma. And we did a survey, that's a kind of picture of how we would go up and do it, that found, if you look simply, 77% of people in the areas that had the conflict, that is up in the hills as opposed to on the coast, had experienced combat, and there were as many as almost 20% of men described themselves as having been tortured during that time, etc. That is, it was a very violent time, and it led to very high rates of mental health problems. So what, in a place that has 4 psychiatrists for 4 million people, do you do? What we developed was that with IOM and a group of young psychiatrists, we developed a system of mobile mental health teams going out into the villages and focusing primarily on mental health services, and in services that are taking place in a way that you don't, doesn't look like your usual psychiatry clinic, right? But these were the kinds of psychiatry clinics, of mental health clinics that we developed, that would go into villages and then continue to go to those villages, providing both medication and counseling over a period of a year, using general practitioners that were supported by the psychiatrists, often who were in cell phone connection with their with the psychiatrist. And what one found after a year of treatment was, number one, 70 to 80% of people reported that they had gotten better or much better from their symptoms. And a final example, when we asked people before you got sick, how long could you work? They said 28 hours a week. After you got sick, when you were sick, their ability to work went down to 10 hours a week, and after treatment with mental health care, it went up to 40 hours a week, which simply says that mental health care with mental illness is an enormous economic burden for families, and that mental health services are often a remarkably positive form of economic support for families. So I'm going to stop with this. I know that we sort of jumped from one topic to another here, but I hope that it gives you a kind of sense about our idea about the importance of the modernization efforts that are underway in medicine, how different they are in different Asian societies, and about the importance of continuing to commit ourselves in these areas. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Byron and Mary Jo, for a very interesting lecture. So we will now have a short question and answer session. And I invite Prof. Tan Sri dan juga Dr. Syafa Hafsah Saksa Syabudi to chair this session. Please.
questions? Maybe some thinking side. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Raymond Ali, Dean of Medical Faculty. Thanks for the beautiful lectures. I understand and agree with all what has been said. I'm going to take us back to the selection of students to become doctors. Because we've been criticized for selecting the wrong people. I just want to see whether you think that anyone can be a doctor, or you think that a student should have a particular personality trait or behavior, attitude. Because some universities do an interview, but we are not allowed to. We just choose the best in the nation. So that's what we do. Just your thoughts, but it's very controversial issue.
Well, you know, the American system is very different because there one doesn't simply take a national exam and a certain group of people are then allowed to go to medical school and persons that with the highest exams. And, you know, I mean, you know and I know that some people who are not very interested in medicine become doctors because they are smart and that they may not be that committed, and that some people who would be really great doctors are excluded. So we know that's the case, but we also know that we don't know how to choose who's going to be a doctor. That any system, that the major place people learn how to be doctors is when they're doing their clinical rotations, when they are when they're with other physicians. And in my mind, I don't know, Mary Jo can add to this, but in my mind, the best way to make a good doctor isn't just by choosing the person who's most committed. It's actually by placing them in an environment where medicine is practiced with a kind of commitment. Medicine is actually being practiced well. If people learn to be the kind of doctors they learn in the hospitals, in the clinics, and one of the things that in the social medicine department we do that also is very much part of the history of Gajah is if you take people out of the hospital and into the community, you actually put them in people's homes and see what really is the experience of illness. And in particular, we're now in a department of global health. If we can take our medical students out of the United States, out of the Brigham Hospital, out of the Massachusetts General Hospital, into communities where there are far scarcer resources, it often changes them radically. They often feel less interested in going back and practicing in really high technology settings where it seems like, as Mary Jo said, almost too much technology, and they become much more committed to practicing medicine in settings of the greatest need. So, yes, there is an issue of how you select physicians, but I think what we can really control is what kind of settings we put them in and how we educate them to be the best possible doctors.
I would suggest, maybe this is too radical, but I think it's useful for people to have liberal education before they go on to medical education, because they have a better sense of how they want to commit their life. And you would also have a better sense of what kind of person they're going to be. And I think that recruiting students right out of high school is very tricky. When we were working in Iran, we knew many doctors, though they were so smart. They were terrific people, but they really did not like practicing medicine. So they became leaders in other things. And so you waste your